I got hospitalized for exhaustion, but no one from my family showed up. No visits, no phone calls, just a text from my brother, "Hey, can you still cover my car payment?" So I stopped pretending I had a family. I did something. 3 days later, my dad called me in a panic because my name's Mara Collins, I'm 30 years old. The world narrowed to a tunnel in the middle of the third grade hallway. The edges of my vision fizzed like static on an old television, a grainy black and white border closing in on the bright primary colors of the bulletin board ahead. I could smell the sharp, clean scent of floor wax that always clung to the school on Monday mornings, and something else, something like burnt toast. I remember a kid named Leo, one of my students, asking if I was okay. His small face was a blur of concern, his voice seeming to come from the end of a long hallway. I tried to answer him, to say I was just a little tired, but my tongue felt thick and heavy in my mouth. My last thought before the speckled linoleum floor rushed up to meet my face was not about my health or what was happening to me. It was this: I still have to pick up a shift at the retail store this weekend. Waking up wasn't a gentle process. There was no slow drift back to consciousness. It was a jolt, a sudden gasp of air under the relentless hum of fluorescent lights. An IV tube was taped to the back of my hand, a thin, clear line tethering me to a metal pole. A kind-faced nurse, probably my mother's age, was checking the drip. Her name tag said Shirley. She smiled down at me, her eyes crinkling at the corners. She used the words severe exhaustion and malnutrition. The words sounded clinical and distant, like they belonged to someone else's life, not mine. I thought of the half-eaten granola bar I'd had for dinner the night before, consumed while restocking a shelf of scented candles at my second job. At the time, taking 5 minutes to eat it had felt like a luxury. Shirley, the nurse with the kind eyes, told me my body had staged a protest. After years of running on fumes, of ignoring every warning sign, it had simply shut down. It had pulled the emergency brake because I wouldn't. My phone sat on the rolling bedside table, a black, silent rectangle, a monolith of indifference. I'd been in the emergency room for 3 hours, according to the clock on the wall. 3 hours since I had collapsed at work, an ambulance called, my body hooked up to machines. Not a single missed call from mom or dad, not a single text asking where I was. Shirley offered me the hospital landline, her voice soft with practiced sympathy. "Do you want to call someone, honey? Let them know you're here." I shook my head, the movement making my temples throb. "I'm fine," I lied. The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. My entire career as a speech therapist was built around helping children find their voice, to shape the sounds and words they struggled with, to help them speak their truth to the world. And yet, here I was, having completely lost my own. I didn't have the words to explain that the people I should call were the very reason I was here. Finally, my phone buzzed, a low vibration against the metal table. My heart gave a pathetic little leap of hope. Maybe they noticed. Maybe they were worried. I reached for it, my hand trembling slightly. It was a text from Cole, my younger brother. It read, "Hey, you good to cover my car payment? It's due Friday." That was it. No "how are you?" No "where have you been?" Just the ask, the immediate, unvarnished transaction. In the sterile, beeping quiet of that room, the pattern of my life wasn't just clear. It was screaming at me from that little screen. I wasn't their daughter. I wasn't their sister. I was their utility, their private, renewable source of income, and the system was finally breaking down. I was discharged with a stack of pamphlets on stress management and healthy eating. The glossy photos of smiling people doing yoga and eating salads felt like a cruel joke. Back in my small studio apartment, the silence was different than it had been before. It wasn't peaceful, it was heavy, suffocating. The air was thick with unspoken truths. I dropped my keys on the small table by the door and sank onto my lumpy futon, the hospital bracelet still tight around my wrist. I looked at Cole's text again, the words glowing in the dim room. "Hey, you good to cover my car payment? It's due Friday." I typed and deleted a dozen replies. I started with apologies. "So sorry, I've been sick, I'll send it as soon as I can." Then I tried excuses. Things are a little tight this month, can it wait? Then promises. Of course, I'll take care of it tomorrow. Each one was a familiar dance, a well-worn path of self-negation. Then I deleted them all, every last one. My fingers hovered over the screen, feeling a strange new resolve hardening in my chest. I opened a new message, not to Cole, but to Dad, the family's designated financial officer. My text was short, blunt, and utterly terrifying. Can't help out this month, I'll be in touch. I didn't explain the hospital, I didn't explain the collapse or the exhaustion or the IV drip, I didn't explain anything. My thumb trembled over the send button. For a moment, it felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to sever the only rope that connected me to anything. But it wasn't a safety rope, I realized. It was a leash. I pressed send. Then I put my phone on silent and dropped it onto the cushion beside me as if it were on fire. The first day was defined by a profound and unsettling silence. No response from Dad, no angry follow-up from Cole. Not even a passive-aggressive "is everything okay?" from Mom. I knew this quiet wasn't born of concern. It was a strategy. They were giving me space to reconsider my foolish little rebellion, to let the guilt fester and bloom in the silence. They expected me to crack, to send a follow-up text full of apologies and the bank transfer confirmation they were waiting for. I didn't. I spent the day in a daze, napping on and off, trying to reclaim some of the energy I had poured out for them over the years. Day 2, the strategy shifted. The gentle probing began. A text from Mom popped up on my screen. "Everything okay, honey? Haven't heard from you." It looked innocent, but I could feel the weight behind it. It was the opening move in a familiar game of chess. An hour later, Cole tried a different angle, direct and impatient. "Dude, seriously, I need that money." The politeness was gone, replaced by the raw demand. Then came Dad, escalating the pressure. "Mara, your mother is worried sick. You need to answer your phone. This isn't like you." The messages were a performance, a coordinated effort to frame my new boundary as a cruel and inexplicable attack. They were painting me as the villain for simply saying no. I didn't respond to any of them. I just watched the notifications pile up, each one a small explosion of their panic. On the evening of the third day, my phone rang. The screen lit up with Dad's picture. I watched it buzz, my heart hammering against my ribs, and let it go to voicemail. He called again immediately, and then a third time. On the third ring, a cold, sinking dread settled in my stomach, a primal fear they had conditioned in me since childhood. It told me to answer. I swiped to accept the call, my hand clammy. His voice on the other end wasn't angry. It was worse, it was shaking with a carefully controlled panic. "Mara, thank God it's your mother." My blood ran cold. He didn't wait for me to respond. He told me she'd had an episode, that she was struggling to breathe. He used vague, terrifying words designed to bypass my logic and hit me directly in the gut. Frightening, could barely move, thought we were going to lose her. He wove a story of a sudden, terrifying health crisis that had struck her down just an hour ago. He never said hospital, he never said doctor, just that she was resting now but was terribly, terribly weak. The implication hung in the air between us, unspoken but as clear as a scream. This was my fault. My silence, my simple two-word text had done this. My refusal to provide had physically harmed her. "If you want to see her," he said, his voice cracking with manufactured grief, "you need to come now." The guilt was a physical thing, a sharp hook twisting in my gut, pulling me back towards them. It didn't matter that a small, rational part of my brain was screaming that this was a trap. It didn't matter that the timing was too perfect. The sliver of a chance that it was true, that my mother was actually in danger, was enough to override everything. My own exhaustion, my half-formed resolve, my desperate need for a life of my own, it all crumbled to dust. I was on the road within 10 minutes, the car pointed toward their house, driving straight back into the fire. The house was quiet and dark when I pulled into the driveway, the curtains drawn against the evening light as if the family were in mourning. It felt like walking onto a movie set. Dad met me at the door, his face a perfect mask of weary concern. He pulled me into a hug, his arms wrapping around me tightly, and whispered, "Thank you for coming." It wasn't a thank you, it was an absolution. He was forgiving me for my transgression. He led me through the dim house to their bedroom. Mom was propped up on a mountain of pillows, a thin blanket pulled up to her chin. The only light came from a small lamp on the nightstand, casting long shadows across her face, making her look pale and fragile. She didn't speak above a whisper. She apologized for worrying me, her voice a reedy thread of sound. She mentioned new, expensive medication the doctor might have to prescribe. She reached for my hand, her grip surprisingly firm for someone supposedly so frail. "I'm just so glad you're here," she breathed. Cole, my brother, was nowhere to be seen, which was strange. For a family crisis of this magnitude, his absence was a glaring plot hole in their carefully constructed drama. The entire performance was flawless. The low lighting, the hushed, reverent tones, the carefully chosen words of vulnerability and fear. I felt a flicker of doubt, a tiny voice in my head screaming that this was all wrong, but I ruthlessly suppressed it. I was here to help. That's what I did. It was my function. It was my only value. Within an hour, I was back in the role I was born to play. The dutiful daughter, the family caretaker, the human ATM. I made Mom a cup of herbal tea, the one she claimed was the only thing that settled her nerves. I tidied the kitchen, wiping down counters and loading the dishwasher, moving on autopilot. I went out to the 24-hour grocery store to pick up the items she desperately needed but was too weak to get herself. While I was making my list, Dad casually mentioned that the washing machine had finally given up the ghost that afternoon, a final, stressful straw on an already terrible day. A new one, he sighed, would be at least $400, money they just didn't have right now. At the pharmacy, I picked up Mom's new meds, a prescription that had apparently been called in that evening. When I got to the counter, I realized she had forgotten to give me her wallet. It was $120. The asks were never direct. They were embedded in conversations about her health, their stress, their bad luck. Each transaction was framed as a necessity, an emergency that only I could solve. I didn't even argue. I didn't question it. I transferred the money from my banking app while sitting in their living room, the pale glow of my phone illuminating my face. $400 for the washer, $120 for the prescription. The money left my account with a sterile little whoosh. It felt as though the last 3 days had never happened. The collapse in the school hallway, the hospital room, the silent, resolute text, it was all just a strange dream. This was my reality, their endless, bottomless need and my exhausted, soul-crushing compliance. Back in my apartment a few days later, a strange and unsettling compulsion took hold of me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. The performance had been a little too perfect, Dad's grief a little too theatrical, Mom's recovery a little too swift. A deep unease had settled in my bones. I opened my laptop, the screen a bright rectangle in my dark apartment, and navigated to my bank's website. I started scrolling back through my transaction history, and back and back. I opened a spreadsheet, the grid of empty cells looking clean and clinical. I began to log every transfer, every payment I had made to Mom, Dad, and Cole. I went back 3 years. 36 months of a slow, steady financial bleed that I had willfully ignored. The numbers, when laid out in neat columns, were staggering. The mortgage, a transfer I made to Dad's account every single month like clockwork, always around $900. Total, $32,400. Utilities, which I covered under the guise of helping out, averaging $220 a month. Total, $7,920. Cole's car payment, a direct transfer to his account for the last 18 months, $290 each time. Total, $5,220. Then came the endless extras, the financial death by 1,000 cuts. A $300 online course for Cole that he never finished. Emergency vet bills for a pet they didn't actually have. Extra cash for holidays, birthdays, and a dozen other manufactured crises. Another $1,600 at least. I created a final cell and entered the formula to sum it all up. The grand total appeared at the bottom of the screen, $47,440. It wasn't just a number, it was a weight, a physical pressure in my chest. It was the down payment on a house I'd never own. It was a vacation to a place I'd never see. It was the price tag of my love, or at least what they had relentlessly taught me was love. A few days later, still reeling from the number on that spreadsheet, I decided to bring my parents some pastries. It was an act of denial, a desperate attempt to pretend everything was normal, to smooth over the cracks that were rapidly appearing in the foundation of my life. A peace offering to them, but mostly to myself. I went to the good bakery near their house, the one with the flaky croissants and the rich, dark coffee. Standing in line, breathing in the warm, yeasty air, I heard a familiar voice. "Mara, dear, is that you?" I turned. It was Mrs. Whittaker, their upstairs neighbor, a sweet, rosy-cheeked woman who always commented on the weather and the state of her prize-winning roses. We made the usual small talk. She asked how I was, and I told her I was just visiting my folks, adding that Mom hadn't been well lately. Mrs. Whittaker's brow furrowed in confusion. "Oh, that's a shame. She seemed perfectly fine on Friday night. I saw her at the pharmacy just down the street." My blood went cold. A low hum started in my ears. "Friday night?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "Are you sure?" "Oh, yes," she said, brightly pleased with her memory. "It was around 6 o'clock. She was laughing with the young girl at the makeup counter. She had a whole basket full of things. It's so lovely to see her getting out and enjoying herself." Friday night at 6 o'clock. The exact time Dad had called me, his voice choked with panic. The exact moment he'd told me she could barely breathe, that he thought they were going to lose her. While I was racing down the highway, sick with guilt and fear, my mother had been browsing for lipstick. I mumbled something to Mrs. Whittaker and left the bakery without buying anything. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. A frantic, buzzing energy propelled me. I drove to my parents' house and let myself in with the key they insisted I keep. The house was empty, quiet. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew I had to find it. Some piece of tangible evidence that would prove I wasn't going crazy. My eyes scanned the kitchen. On the counter, next to a pile of junk mail, was the small wicker bin where my mom tossed her receipts and grocery lists. It was overflowing. Sticking out from the top was a crumpled piece of paper, a receipt from the pharmacy. My heart hammered against my ribs. I smoothed it out on the cool granite countertop. My eyes jumped to the top, scanning for the date, Friday, timestamp. 6:17 p.m. The items listed below weren't medication. They weren't prescriptions or cough drops or heating pads. They were lipstick, foundation, waterproof mascara, and 3 different shades of nail polish. The total at the bottom of the slip read $163.45. It was proof, hard paper proof, that their story was a lie. The frightening episode hadn't been a medical crisis. It had been a shopping trip. As I stood there in the silent kitchen holding the flimsy piece of paper that had just destroyed my world, I heard the front door open. It was Cole. I froze, my body reacting before my brain could, and I ducked back into the narrow hallway that led to the laundry room, out of sight. He was on his phone, his voice loud and infuriatingly cheerful, bouncing off the walls of the entryway. "Yeah, man, it totally worked," he said. "She came right over, sent the cash for the washer and everything." He paused, listening to the person on the other end, then let out a sharp, ugly laugh. "I'm telling you, Mom should have been an actress. She had the whole weak voice thing down perfectly." He kept talking, his words a torrent of casual cruelty. He was gloating, bragging about how they had pulled it off and how I had bought the whole thing, hook, line, and sinker. Each word was a nail hammering the awful truth into place. "Dad was brilliant," Cole continued, his voice full of admiration. The shaky voice on the phone, a masterstroke. It wasn't just a lie they had told in a moment of desperation, it was a conspiracy. A planned, rehearsed performance with a script and actors, and I was the sole audience member and, more importantly, the sole benefactor. They had built a stage and I had dutifully played my part. I didn't storm out of the hallway. I didn't scream at him, I didn't confront him and watch him try to lie his way out of it. The rage was there, a white-hot supernova exploding in my chest, but it was a cold fire. It didn't burn me, it forged me. It cooled everything inside me, all the swirling guilt and confusion and hurt, into a kind of steel. All the years of feeling like I wasn't good enough, all the deeply ingrained guilt that I was somehow responsible for their happiness and their survival, it all vanished in that instant. It was replaced by a profound, chilling certainty. They didn't love me, they couldn't. Love doesn't do this. I waited until I heard him go upstairs, his footsteps heavy on the creaking steps. Then I slipped out the back door, closing it silently behind me. I walked away from that house not as a daughter but as a witness to a crime. My own. The goal was no longer to survive them or to please them or to fix them. The goal was to erase them, to build a wall so high and so thick they could never, ever get over it again. My revenge wouldn't be a loud, dramatic explosion. It would be silent, permanent, and complete. I didn't cry on the drive home. The tears were gone, burned away by the cold rage. Instead, I made a list in my head, a sequence of simple, practical steps. Step 1, block their numbers, all of them. Dad, Mom, Cole, no more calls, no more texts. Step 2. Go to the bank first thing in the morning when it opened. Step 3, cancel every automatic payment, every recurring transfer that bled from my account into theirs. The mortgage, the utilities, everything. Step 4. Change my own phone number. It wasn't enough to block them, I needed a clean break, a number they didn't have. Step 5, start compiling the evidence. The bank statements going back years, the screenshots of manipulative text messages. The plan was brutally simple. There would be no confrontation, no dramatic monologue explaining how they had hurt me. Confrontation was a stage and I was done performing for them. They didn't deserve an explanation. The only language they had ever truly understood was consequence. I was about to give them a masterclass. I would not be their emergency contact. I would not be their bank. I would not be their emotional dumping ground any longer. The free ride was officially over. The next morning, I was waiting outside the bank 10 minutes before it opened. The teller who helped me, a young woman named Chloe with a friendly smile, looked increasingly concerned as I listed the automatic payments I needed to cancel. "Are you sure, Miss Collins?" she asked, her brow furrowed. "Some of these are for a mortgage payment." "I'm sure," I said, and my voice didn't waver. There was a finality in it that even I found surprising. From the bank, I went straight to the phone store. It felt strangely liberating to stand there as the clerk deactivated my old number, the one they had used as a direct line to my guilt and my wallet for over a decade. Back at my apartment, I blocked them on every social media platform I could think of. I went through years of text messages on my phone, screenshotting every guilt-tripping message from Mom, every passive-aggressive demand from Dad, every entitled plea for cash from Cole. Each action, every click, every tap, every signature felt like another brick being laid in the wall I was building around my new life. For the first time in as long as I could remember, the silence in my apartment didn't feel like a prelude to an attack. It felt like peace. It took 4 days for them to realize they'd been completely cut off. The backlash, when it came, wasn't direct. They couldn't call or text me anymore, so it came through the one channel I hadn't thought to close. My work email. An email from Dad appeared in my inbox, the subject line a blaze of capital letters. "Emergency, your mother." I opened it with a feeling of detached curiosity. The email was a torrent of accusations, a fire hose of blame and manufactured hysteria. I was cruel, I was ungrateful, I was a selfish daughter who was abandoning her family. He claimed Mom had suffered a severe panic attack when the mortgage payment bounced. He demanded I call him immediately to fix the damage I had caused. He didn't ask if I was okay, he didn't ask for an explanation. He just demanded compliance. A few hours later, another email arrived, this one from an unfamiliar address. It was Cole. His message was less eloquent but just as revealing. "WTF is wrong with you? My car is about to get repossessed because of you. Not "I'm worried about you," not "what's going on," just "you are costing me." They couldn't comprehend a boundary, they could only interpret it as a betrayal, a malfunction in their personal ATM. Their panic wasn't for me, it was for themselves. I read both emails, then I moved them to the trash folder without a single flicker of regret. Their panic was no longer my problem to solve. When the direct attacks failed to produce the desired result, they deployed the relatives. They began to weaponize the family against me. The first call was from my Aunt Carol, my mom's sister. It came on my new phone number, which they must have gotten from another family member. Her tone was syrupy sweet, dripping with false concern. "Mara, honey, your mother is just beside herself," she began without even a hello. "She's worried sick, she thinks you hate her." Aunt Carol then proceeded to repeat their script verbatim. I was selfish, I was abandoning them in their time of need, my mother's health was fragile and my actions were putting her at risk. She told me that whatever silly little fight we were having, I needed to get over it and be a good daughter. She never once asked for my side of the story. Then came a text from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 3 years, lecturing me that family is everything and I was breaking my parents' hearts. They had painted a masterful picture for the rest of the family. A portrait of a cruel, unstable daughter turning her back on a pair of loving, bewildered parents who had done nothing but support her. Each call and text was a fresh wave of manipulation, a reminder that their deception wasn't just about money. It was about controlling the narrative, ensuring that in everyone else's eyes they were the victims and I was the villain. I realized then that my silence wasn't enough. My silence was a vacuum and they were more than happy to fill it with their own poisonous lies. That's when I created the family ledger. If they wanted to control the narrative, I would give them one they couldn't spin. I spent an entire weekend organizing everything into a single, shared online folder, my fingers flying across the keyboard with a cold, methodical purpose. Subfolder 1 was titled Bank Statements. I went through the last 36 months of statements, highlighting every single transfer I had made to them. I put a summary page at the front with the running total in a large, bold font. $47,440. Subfolder 2 was Text Messages. I uploaded every screenshot. Cole's blunt demands for his car payment. Mom's endless guilt trips about her health and her worries. Dad's carefully worded messages applying financial pressure just before bills were due. Subfolder 3 was simply called The Crisis. In it, I wrote a short, factual summary of the faked medical event. I included the date, the time of my dad's panicked phone call, and I attached a clear, high-resolution photo of the pharmacy receipt for $163 in cosmetics, time-stamped for the exact moment my mother was supposedly struggling for breath. I wrote a 1-page cover letter to serve as the introduction. It wasn't emotional, it wasn't angry, it was factual. It simply stated, "This is not a family dispute. This is a record of long-term financial exploitation." This ledger wasn't just a shield anymore. It was a weapon made of the one thing they could never argue with or deny, their own words and their own actions laid out in undeniable black and white. The folder was ready. The evidence was compiled, organized, and irrefutable. But I hadn't sent it yet. I hesitated. For one single, awful night, all the old programming, all the conditioning they had spent 30 years installing, kicked back in with a vengeance. The loneliness of my little apartment felt immense, crushing. The silence, which had felt like peace, now felt like a vast, empty void. Maybe they were right. The insidious whispers started in my head. Maybe I was cruel. Maybe this was just what families did for each other, and I was the one who was broken. The core belief they had so carefully installed in me resurfaced, ugly and powerful. Without them, I was nothing. My only value was my utility, my ability to provide. Take that away, and what was left? I thought about my dad's panicked voice on the phone, my mom's pale, fragile face in that dark room. Even knowing it was all a lie, a carefully staged performance, the image still had power over me. It still twisted my gut with a phantom pang of guilt. What if I was making the biggest mistake of my life? What if I was throwing away the only family I would ever have? The isolation felt absolute. I was an army of one, fighting a war against my own history, and I was so exhausted from the fight. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over the contact list. I almost called them. I almost apologized just to make the awful feeling go away, to put everything back the way it was, no matter how broken it had been. The next day at work, I kept my head down and moved through the halls like a ghost. Kids laughed outside the speech room, their sneakers squeaking on the tile, and I felt like I was underwater, their voices warped and far away. Brittany James leaned in my doorway at lunch with her mug and a raised eyebrow. She wore a cardigan the color of sunshine and had paint on her fingertips from a classroom project. "You look like you're carrying the world today," she said. "Want to grab a coffee after the last bell?" I almost said no. The word was right there, but her voice was gentle and she wasn't trying to get anything from me, she was just there. "Okay," I said. We walked to the little cafe 2 blocks from the school, the one that always smelled like cinnamon. We took a tiny table by the window. I wrapped my hands around a paper cup and let the heat sink into my palms. Traffic whispered past outside, leaves scraping the curb. "I'm not great company," I warned. "I don't need you to be," she said. "I'll carry the conversation if you want." We sat in a soft quiet for a minute, the kind that didn't itch. I didn't tell her everything, I didn't have the words for everything yet. "Family stuff," I said. "It's a lot." She nodded like she knew the shape of that. "That sounds incredibly hard." "I'm sorry you're going through it alone." Something in my chest loosened. She didn't ask me to prove it. She didn't ask for details to satisfy some hungry curiosity. She just saw that I was hurting and met me there. Then she told me about a kid in her class who held up a glue stick like a microphone and did a weather report about a storm of glitter. We laughed, the kind of laughter that starts small and grows by accident. My eyes watered a little, and not from crying. We walked back as the sky turned pink. At the door of my room, she touched my elbow. "If you need help with anything this week, I'm around," she said. "I mean it." "Thank you," I said. It was a simple phrase, but it felt like a life raft. It was support without a price tag, kindness without a ledger. It was a tiny, steady light in a hallway that had felt endless and dark. On the way home, I didn't feel like calling anyone to make the pain stop. I wanted to protect the small, honest space I'd found. I wanted to protect myself. That night, I set my laptop on the kitchen table and pulled out the chair. The apartment was quiet in a way that didn't scare me now. Outside, a siren wailed and faded, and somewhere a dog barked once and went quiet. I opened my email and stared at the blank message window. My hands were steady. I typed in the names: Aunt Carol, the cousin who'd texted me, my mom's 2 sisters who hadn't called but would eventually. I added my parents' and Cole's last known addresses to the CC line. The subject line was simple: answering your questions. In the body, I wrote one sentence: "Before you judge, I encourage you to review the attached." I pasted the link to the folder. I could see the subfolders in my mind, neat and undeniable. The bank statements, the screenshots, the photo of the receipt with its ugly numbers and exact time. I didn't add anything else. No story, no defense. I didn't need to argue with anyone. I didn't need to ask to be believed. Reality was right there in black and white. I read the sentence again. It was calm. It was clean. It handed the responsibility back to the people who were so eager to carry it when it was easy and so eager to set it down when it required work. I thought about my younger self, the version of me who would have written a novel, apologized twice, and begged for understanding. I thought about her and wished I could hand her this moment. I looked at the send button. For a second, a memory flickered. Mom in the dim room, Dad's hand on my shoulder. I let the picture pass through me like a wave and keep going. It didn't stick. I clicked send. The whoosh of the email leaving felt nothing like fireworks. It felt like setting a heavy box down on a porch and walking away. My shoulders dropped. I didn't realize how tight they'd been until that moment. I closed the laptop and sat there, listening to my own breathing. I didn't need to wait by the computer and watch the replies roll in like a scoreboard. The story wasn't mine to carry by myself anymore. The first reply came from Aunt Carol less than 20 minutes later. It was one word. Oh. I stared at it and almost smiled. I could see her in her kitchen, clicking through the folders, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. Another email pinged from her 10 minutes after that. It was longer, choppy, full of commas and backspaces I could feel even though I couldn't see them. Mara, I'm so sorry, I had no idea. I should have asked you before I called. I am shocked. Please take care of yourself. We'll talk soon if you want. My phone buzzed with a text from my cousin. I'm sorry, I didn't know. I won't pass along what they sent me anymore. If you need anything, I'm here. Some people never wrote back. They were the ones who preferred the simple story, the old one where the roles were clear and no one had to change their minds. Their silence didn't hurt. It felt like a door I didn't want to walk through anyway. Then there was Great Aunt Millie. Her email was short and sharp. This is a cruel and unusual way to air dirty laundry. Family matters should be kept in the family. I didn't reply. I didn't need to teach an old woman a new language when mine finally felt natural in my mouth. I clicked out of the email and washed a dish that had been sitting in the sink, breathing in the lemon soap like it was the first scent I'd noticed all day. The most telling response was the one that didn't come. Nothing from Mom, nothing from Dad. Nothing from Cole. The people who had filled my inbox and my days with demands went quiet. They didn't defend themselves. They didn't apologize. They disappeared. Their power had always lived in the shadows, in whispers, in my guilt. In the light, they had nothing to say. Their silence wasn't empty. It was an answer. Weeks later, I heard from Aunt Carol again, not with judgments or suggestions, but with updates I hadn't asked for and didn't fear. Cole's car had been repossessed. She said the tow truck came in the early morning when it was still dark and he stood in the driveway barefoot, yelling at nobody. I pictured him hopping from foot to foot on the cold concrete and felt nothing. No sting, no pleasure, a blank space where the old hook used to be. Dad's freelance work had dried up, which made sense now because it had always been a story built on my deposits. Mom, whose health had been too delicate to work a cash register or sit at a desk all those years, was now a cashier at a craft store a few miles from their old house. Aunt Carol said she complained about her feet on the phone. I poured milk into my coffee and watched it curl like smoke and said, They sold the house, the one with the crooked porch light and the too many things everywhere. They moved into a cramped one-bedroom across town, the kind of place where the couch is also the second bed. I didn't try to picture it. My mind had better rooms now. I didn't feel joy at their misfortune. What I felt was distance. Their lives had slipped off my shoulders and into their own hands where they belonged all along. If I felt anything, it was a sad kind of relief. Not for them, for the girl I used to be. The cost of my freedom was the family I thought I had, but I realized I'd lost them long before I hit send. I had just finally stopped paying for the funeral. At school, time didn't feel like a countdown anymore. It felt like steps forward. A boy who'd been afraid to read aloud in front of anyone tugged my sleeve one Tuesday and said, "Miss Collins, can I try the paragraph?" His voice shook on the first sentence and then smoothed out like a road after a pothole. He finished, cheeks pink, and looked at me like he wasn't sure what he'd done. "You did that," I told him. "You did that yourself." He grinned so big it made his ears tilt, and I had to swallow before I could speak again. Progress wasn't big and flashy, it was small and honest. It was the opposite of the performances I'd grown up inside. I left my second job at the retail store. The extra money had never been extra. It had gone where everything else went. I didn't miss the smell of fake pine and the ache in my ankles. I slept. I cooked simple food. I went for a walk after dinner and watched the sky turn the color of peaches. Sometimes, late at night, my phone sat quiet on the nightstand and I'd realize hours had gone by without me checking it. The silence didn't taunt me, it wrapped around me like a blanket. On Saturdays, I lingered in the grocery store and picked out fruit that smelled like summer, not because someone needed it, but because I wanted it. I put fresh flowers in a jar and felt the tiny pop of joy every time I walked past them. The kids at school kept stacking victories one sound at a time. An R landed right for the first time. An S didn't whistle. A shy girl raised her hand to ask for a turn. I wrote their wins on sticky notes and lined them on the edge of my desk like little flags. The clean, simple progress was a balm. Every time one of them found their voice, mine felt stronger too. I didn't owe anyone a transfer. I didn't owe anyone an excuse. When people asked what I did on the weekend, I said, I slept in, I made pancakes, and no part of me flinched. I could feel the shape of my life changing, not into something dramatic, but into something true. I'd given up the worst job in the world, being everyone's answer. I'd taken a new one, being my own. I moved out of my noisy studio on a Saturday that smelled like rain. The movers carried my dented dresser up a narrow set of stairs, and I followed with a box of dishes pressed to my chest. My new place was a second-floor walk-up that faced a park. Through the big window, I could see a patch of grass, a swing set, and a slice of sky. Even empty, the apartment felt like a deep breath. The first night, I slept on my mattress on the floor with the window cracked. I heard crickets and a train far off and a couple laughing as they walked their dog. It wasn't perfect. The floor creaked and the tap dripped unless I turned it just right, but the quiet belonged to me. I started swimming again. I joined the public pool and went at dawn. The water was cool enough to make me gasp a little. I pushed off the wall and counted tiles and let my arms and legs remember what steady felt like. Laps don't lie. You show up, you move, you turn at the wall and come back. There's no applause, there's no trick, just the clean burn in your muscles and the small pride of keeping a promise to yourself. One afternoon, walking home from the pool with wet hair and a towel in my bag, I stopped at a little pottery shop near my street. On a shelf, there was a mug the color of deep pine. I picked it up and it was heavy in a way that made my hands feel strong. The glaze was smooth but not perfect. My thumb fit into a shallow groove on the side like it had been waiting for me. I bought it without asking myself if I deserved it. On my way out, a tiny tray by the register caught my eye. Simple silver earrings, small and bright. I bought those too. I put them in before I got home. The metal was cool against my skin, then warm. In the mornings now, I boil water in a chipped kettle and pour it slow. The steam curls up like a little ghost. I hold the green mug in both hands and stand by the window and watch the park wake up. A runner passes. A dog chases a squirrel with more hope than sense. The sun pulls itself over the trees and the light lays a gold stripe on my floorboards. I don't grab my phone. I don't flinch at every sound. I sit down and drink my coffee and feel the mug's solid weight. I bought it because I wanted to. That sentence still surprises me. The opening of my story was me hitting the floor, my body refusing to play a part it never chose. The final picture is this one, me at my window, hair damp from the pool, silver catching a bit of light at my ears, a green mug warm in my hands. I'm not running. I'm not listening for footsteps. I'm still. And in the stillness, I can hear my own voice. It's quiet, but it's mine. It says, "You're here, you made it." If my story helped you find a little courage, tell me in the comments. If you've had to fight to be heard, share your voice here. Subscribe for more true stories like this, and thank you for listening to mine.